Hi there, my name is Karina, and this knitting instructional video is part of a series of how-to videos that I'll be creating for my Knit 2 Together, Purl 2 Together knitting blog. This year I've decided to tackle each knitting pattern listed in the Vogue Knitting Stitch a Day 2011 calendar. I plan on combining all of the knitted swatches together to form a quilt by the end of the year. As I go through and tackle each pattern, I will be blogging, taking pictures, and videotaping my progress, providing any notes and tips I may have, plus offering any insight on how to knit each knitting pattern. Today I will be talking about the Diamonds and Eyelets knitting pattern. It's a lace knitting pattern for January 12th, 2011, as you see here. This is what it looks like on the Vogue Knitting Stitch a Day 2011 calendar. As you can see, it's for January 12th, and it's comprised of these diagonal eyelet lace lines with these diamond-shaped stockinette stitch patterns, and that's why it's called Diamonds and Eyelets. So let's go back and see, this is a nice little summary card that I've created of the basic information for this swatch. So this pattern. It's a lace knitting pattern for January 12th, and this pattern asks for the swatch dimensions of for the width, a multiple of 15 stitches plus 5 stitches. So you know, for my gauge size, I had decided I wanted to have each swatch be comprised of 36 stitches across times 48 rows. So to be able to adjust to this pattern, I would be using 35 stitches across instead, because 35, 2 times 15 is 30 plus 5 is 35, so that matches the width of the swatch required for this pattern. And as for the height, it asks for a multiple of 28 rows to be able to complete the full vertical cycle of the pattern. So what you see here, if I go back to the pattern, in order to get the full vertical, pattern repeat, you would need 28 rows minimum. For my gauge size, I wanted 48 rows, so that doesn't really divide evenly into 28. But I'm going to keep the 48 rows anyways, and that's fine. I mean, I can do that. All it's just going to do is it's not going to create a full diamond repeat pattern vertically, but that's okay. So I'm going to start analyzing this pattern now. Even though it consists of 28 vertical rows in this pattern, so each row each odd number row anyways are completely different for the 28 cycle, whereas on the even number rows though, it's pretty much the same thing. So that makes it a lot easier for me to analyze it. So for all even number rows on the wrong side of the pattern, all you're doing is purling across. So that's easy enough. I'm not gonna go into detail about that. It's pretty self-explanatory. And as for the odd number rows, like I said, they're all slightly different, but they're comprised of four basic types of knitting stitches. So here we go. I'm going to talk about that. For the odd number rows, you're either knitting stitches, so whether you're knitting 1, 2, 3, or 4 in a row, and then you're either yarning over, knitting 2 together, or you're performing a slip knit decrease stitch. So let's go over that again. For yarn overs, that's literally taking the strand of yarn from your right hand, wrapping it around the right needle, and that forms that one extra loop around your right needle. So that means it's increased the number of stitches on your row by 1. However, when you're doing these odd number rows in this pattern, you're never going to have any less or more number of stitches than what you started off with, because every time you do a yarn over, you're always going to pair that up with a decrease stitch type. So it's either a knitting 2 together decrease or a slip knit decrease. And those will decrease the number of stitches in your row by 1, but like I said, this pattern always asks for a pairing of a yarn over with one of these decrease stitches, so you're always going to end up with the same number of stitches in your row. As to which one to use, why are there 2 different types of decrease stitches that are asked for in this pattern? Well, that's simply because if you look back at the pattern here, you'll see that these eyelet lines, these diagonal lines, are formed by, you know, they're either leaning left or they're leaning right. And for them to be able to lean in those directions, it depends on which type of decrease stitches that you're using. So for, if you're knitting two together, then what you're going to have formed are these right leaning diagonal lines. Whereas if you want the left leaning diagonal lines, you're going to have to perform a slip, slip, knit, decrease stitch. So I'll show you what I mean when we get to analyzing what I've got knitted so far. This is my swatch that I've already done. I'm pretty much almost done, like you can see here. And this is what the pattern should look like. Like I said, these are the eyelets, these lace eyelets that are formed by having a yarn over paired with one of the decrease stitch types. So here you can see, if you can see in detail, like these diagonal lines here that are leaning towards the right, they're formed by pairing a knit two together with a yarn over. So when you do a knit two together decrease, it goes that way, the lines. Whereas if you do a slip, slip, knit stitch decrease, you'll see these diagonal lines going towards the left. So it strategically depends on where these decrease stitch types are placed in the row in the pattern, and that's what forms these diagonal lines. And as for the diamond shapes, they're just knitted on the right side and just purled on the wrong side. Like I said, all the even number rows you'll be purling across. So that forms the stockinette stitch pattern that are diamond shaped because you're matching it with diagonal eyelet lines. So right now I am on row 17. So I'm going to show you how to knit that one row, and that should be enough for you to be able to handle the rest of the pattern because, like I said, they're all built around the 4 different types of stitches. So for row 17, you can see here, you're starting it off by knitting 2. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And then you're going to repeat what's within sandwiched between the 2 asterisks. That's your 15 stitch multiple that I mentioned earlier. So like I said, remember there's always going to be 15 stitches that you're going to repeat over and over between the 2 asterisks till you reach the last 3 stitches, and then you'll be knitting. So that's why it asks for a 15 stitch multiple of the pattern plus 5, because you're knitting 2 and you're knitting 3 at the end, so that's where the plus 5 comes from. So here, to analyze the multiple, you can see that it starts off with knitting 2 together. So again, that's a decrease stitch type paired with a yarn over. That means that that's an increase stitch type. So therefore, you're going to balance out the decrease with the increase so that you're not going to end up with any extra or less stitches per row. So you do that 3 times. Then you just simply knit 5 across, and then you follow that up with on the other side, which is you're doing a yarn over paired up with a slip, slip, knit, decrease stitch type. So that, again, it balances it out so you're not getting any more or less stitches at the end of the row than when you started off with. And you keep going and repeating what's in this asterisk until you get to the last 3, and then you knit. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we are at the beginning of row 17. So like I said, I'm starting it off by knitting the first 2 stitches, and that's straightforward knitting, so I'm not going to really go into detail. And then it asks for you to knit 2 together and perform a yarn over 3 times. So when you're knitting 2 together, that's pretty easy. You're just simply taking the next 2 loops on your left needle, and you're taking your right needle and knitting into both the loops together as if it was just one loop, and then you're just going to do a normal knitting into those 2 loops, and there I've got 1 stitch now left on my right needle that used to be 2 stitches on the left needle. So it's technically formed a decrease. So you technically decreased the number of stitches on your row. But that's okay, because I'm going to then follow that up with a yarn over. So I'm taking the yarn on my right hand and literally just wrapping this yarn from back to front like that, just like that, and now I've got this extra loop around my right needle, and that forms an increase stitch. So now that's balanced off the decrease from before, and now I've got the same number of stitches in the row as what I would have started off with. So I do that 3 times. So once again, I'm knitting into the 2 stitches as if it's 1 stitch, yarn over, and then knitting into 2, and then yarn over. So that's 3 times that I did that. And like you can see here, these lines are going leaning towards the right, these diagonal lines, and that's what happens when you knit two together and follow that up with a yarn over. So you do that, and then for the next, you can see here, for the next 5 stitches you just do simple knitting. So let's do that. That's easy enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just knitted 5 stitches across. Easy. Now I'm going to go to the opposite side, where I'm going to be following the knitted 5 stitches with a yarn over and a slip slip knit decrease stitch. So like I said, what that does is it just makes it so that the diagonal lines lean towards the left. So yarn over, we did that already, it's easy. Just take this yarn, wrap it around the right needle once, that's a yarn over. So for the slip slip knit decrease stitch, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be slipping the stitches from your left needle onto your right needle twice, because it's a slip slip knit stitch. So you're slipping them twice as if you were to to knit into the stitch. That's really important because you can either slip a stitch purlwise or knitwise. Knitwise is simply as follows. You go and you take this right needle that you've got here and you're going to insert it into the loop, the first loop on the left needle, as if you're knitting into the stitch. So that's what it means by slipping it knitwise. So you're taking the needle, you're going into this first loop from left to right. When you go into it from left to right, it's almost like you're knitting, right? And you're knitting into that stitch. But instead of knitting into it, all you're doing is then you're sliding it off the left needle onto the right needle, and that's it. That's just simply slipping it knitwise. You did it once, you do it again. Take the right needle, go through the loop on the left needle from left to right in the front, and then you're sliding it off, and that's slipping 2 stitches knitwise. And now you're going to take this left needle, because you're going to knit into it to be able to do the decrease. I'm going to take this left needle, insert it into the 2 loops you just slipped off from the left to the right. You're going to insert it into those 2 loops from left to right through the front part, like so. You see here? So I'm going to take this left needle, insert it into the 2 loops I just slipped off from the left needle to the right needle, insert it from left to right through the top, like that, and then I'm going to knit into these 2 stitches together at once. So taking this yarn on my right hand, wrapping it around like a normal knitted stitch, and then taking those 2 strands and sliding it off like like just knitting into any normal stitch. So now I've got 1 stitch left over remaining on my right needle from that decrease. So I went from 2 loops to 1 loop, and that formed a decrease stitch that's leaning towards the left. As you can see, these diagonal lines are leaning towards the left from doing the slip slip knit decrease. So let's do that again. So I'm taking this yarn and I'm wrapping it around the right needle. That's a yarn over, and then I'm going to SSK by sliding it from left to right knitwise, left to right knitwise, taking this left needle, putting it through the 2 loops from left to right on the front side, and knitting into both of these loops together as if it's a normal stitch. And there we have a slip slip knit decrease. So I did that twice, and if you look back at the card, I'm now back at the end of the asterisk. So that means I have to now go back to the beginning of the asterisk and repeat that multiple again. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to go hurry and do this, and knit 2 together, yarn over, and then do this 3 times, remember? So knit 2 together, yarn over, and then knit 2 together, yarn over. So that's 3 times I did that. Then I'm just going to knit across 5, just regular 2, 3, 4, 5, just regular knitting. And then I'm going to do the yarn over and the SSK twice. So yarn over, slip, slip, knit, yarn over, slip, slip, and then knit. Oops. Sorry, I'm trying to rush. Okay. And then, there we go. And then I've reached the last 3 stitches on my needle, and I knit into the last 3, and that's row 17. That's done for you, and that's what it looks like on the swatch. So this has been Karina from the Knit 2 Together, Purl 2 Together knitting blog, and this has been analyzing the Diamonds and Eyelets knitting pattern for January 12th, 2011 for the Vogue Knitting Stitch a Day calendar. Thanks!